Tonight, rape slavery comes to Canada. So why haven't you heard about it? It's January 14th, and you're watching the Ezra Levant Show.
Why should others go to jail when you're the biggest carbon consumer I know?
There's 8,500 customers here, and you won't give them an answer.
You come here once a year with a sign, and you feel morally superior.
The only thing I have to say to the government about why I publish it is because it's my bloody right to do so.
Yesterday, a 33-year-old Muslim migrant to Canada, Walid Mustafa Chaloub, was convicted of 24 charges of sexual assault and extortion against 10 teenage girls in Montreal. He pled guilty partway through his trial. Here's what Chaloub would do. He would find teenage white girls, barely half his age, still school-age girls, and he'd lure them to his place. Sometimes it was with offers of jobs or cash. Sometimes it was to a party with alcohol and drugs. So he'd get teenage girls drunk or high and then have sex with these underage girls, and sometimes film it and then threaten these girls with exposing them, threatening to upload the sex tapes to the internet to shame the girls, to the world, to their families, unless they paid him money or had more sex with him. A grotesque flourish was that Chaloub would make little handwritten contracts and force the girls to sign them. And after they were drunk and drugged and signed these vague contracts, he would then claim the girls had agreed to do basically whatever he wanted them to do, to grant him sex, whatever, and there would be enormous financial penalties if they didn't. Here's an example. Last year, one teenage girl signed one of these so-called contracts, and Chaloub told her it required her to have sex with him for a pornographic movie. Here's what the teenage girl said happened when she said she didn't want to do the movie. Quote, "I said I didn't want to do it. He said that to annul the contract would cost me $3,800. He said he could set my house on fire, to think of my family, that he was part of the mafia," unquote. She was a teenager, half his age. That witness said that she was intimidated into having sex with Chaloub and that she held on to her friend's hand while Chaloub raped her because she didn't want her friend to leave because she was terrified of being left alone with this monster. Then, quote, "He told me to stop crying because it didn't excite him," unquote. And here's what that friend said, the one who held her hand to comfort her as she was being raped. Quote, "It was horrible. I saw fear. I saw hate. I never saw her like that before," unquote. Of course not. That's Islamic rape slavery. It's come to Canada now. He did this to 10 girls. He was a mass rapist. He raped more women than Paul Bernardo did. He initially pled not guilty, but that's why they ran the trial, and then he pled guilty and he was convicted yesterday, an 11-year sentence. But of course, under our laws, he'll be out on day parole in less than 2 years. Are you shocked by this story? A story of systematic grooming and exploitation and rape and intimidation of white girls by a Muslim migrant rape slaver. It's rape slavery of the sort that the Islamic State terrorist group does overseas, of the sort that racked the British city of Rotherham, where a Pakistani rape gang raped and abused 1,400 white girls over a period of 16 years in a city of just 250,000 people. Imagine that. But look at that UK newspaper headline there. People in authority were afraid of being labeled racist if they tackled it. In Rotherham, UK, police and child welfare social workers knew what was going on. They had countless complaints from the girls, from their parents, but they refused to do anything because the perpetrators were Muslim and the victims were white. So the police didn't want to be called Islamophobic. In fact, in one case in Rotherham, a mother who complained to the police again and again that her daughter was being raped was told by the police to stop wasting their time, and the police threatened her, the mom, and said she could be charged for being an improper parent if she kept talking about it. Well, in Montreal, at least in this one case, the Muslim rapist who came here in 2007 but is not a Canadian citizen, he was charged and prosecuted and convicted. And maybe he'll be deported when he's out of jail in 2 years. I doubt it. knowing how pro-migrant our federal courts are. But at least in this one case that we know about, a Muslim rape slaver, a predatory pimp who exploited 10 teenage girls and raped them and threatened them, we know that in this one case, the police and prosecutors were not afraid, so far, of being called Islamophobic. But here's my question. This is a grotesque case. It is horrific. I had trouble reading the testimony of the teenage girls who were raped, one holding the other's hand. It's shocking, it is troubling. This is Paul Bernardo levels of cruelty. Happened in Montreal, second largest city in Canada. Have you heard about it in the news? Was it on CBC's The National last night? Was it on CTV? In our big newspapers, the Globe and Mail, the National Post, the Toronto Star? No, it wasn't. I did a media search today, and this story was only in a handful of places. It was on a website for the CBC's Montreal local news page. It was on La Presse's website, and it was on one TV channel, the French channel called TVA. The only actual newspaper it was printed in was the Montreal Gazette, but it was tucked away in the newspaper, deep inside, hidden. Can you even find that story on this page? It's the smallest story, the only one without the photo, literally buried. Now hang on. I was told that we have to be alert to rape culture in our society, that we have to care more about missing and murdered women and girls. I was told we need a national inquiry about women and girls who are vulnerable and go missing and wind up raped or dead. And here we have that, but it's hidden in Montreal, the city where it happened. That's the only place this news has been reported. And it was just simply not reported anywhere else. A mass serial rapist. Heartbreaking witness testimony, ruined lives, shattered futures, a vicious, violent pimp. I know the difference, though. Paul Bernardo was a blonde white guy, so the press reported on how violent and barbaric he was. Of course, he was a murderer as well, not just a rapist. Walid Shaloub is a Muslim migrant, though. He's a mass rapist, a serial rapist, just as diabolical as Bernardo. But right now, the media loves Muslim migrants and doesn't want to interrupt that narrative. And it's not like he raped Aboriginal girls. They were just white infidels, so bury the story. There's no other explanation. This is the most shocking crime I have read about in Canada in a year, probably in years. And yet there's a media blackout about it. Look, I'm worried about Muslim terrorism, sure I am, but the odds of being killed by a Muslim terrorist here in Canada is pretty low. What I'm actually worried far more about is the cultural baggage brought to Canada by Muslim migrants, especially the men. The cultural practices that fall far short of terrorism, but that erode our country in other ways that affect us all. Like the 1,000 Muslim men who groped and assaulted and raped 500 women in the German city of Cologne on New Year's Eve, like the serial mass rapes in Tahrir Square that are so common amongst Muslim men, they have a name, Taharish, like the systematic grooming and exploitation of teenaged infidel girls by Muslim men in Rotherham. Come to think of it, none of these things are much worse than terrorism if you're a victim, are they? That's what I'm afraid of. Not a building being blown up, but these cultural practices coming to Canada. And it is come to Canada. We've had honor murders here before where Muslim men kill Muslim women who dare to go out without wearing a hijab or a niqab, who dare to want to be Canadian, not Muslim first. So we've had Muslim men murder their own families in Canada. But this is the first case I've seen of Muslim mass rape and rape, grooming and exploitation and slavery. With 50,000 more Syrian migrants being fast-tracked into Canada, without a single question being asked of them about their views of women or infidels, or about violence or Sharia law, do you really think this will be the last case? Stay with us for more. Well, the thing about socialism is that eventually you run out of other people's money to spend, and it's barely been 6 months, but the Alberta NDP has reached that point. They have plundered the province, jacked up taxes, brought in promises of new carbon taxes, higher income taxes, personal income taxes, corporate income taxes, royalty reviews. And guess what? The revenue is plummeting, not just because of the price of oil is going down, but because so many people are fleeing the province, jobs and investment is fleeing, and unemployment is up 100,000. So we've started to see reality creak in just a tiny crack. And joining us now from Calgary to talk about this reality beginning to dawn on the NDP government is our friend Paige McPherson, the Canadian Taxpayers Federation boss from Alberta, who joins us now via Skype. Hey, Paige, great to see you again.
Thanks so much for having me.
It's always a pleasure. You know, Joe Ceci, the province's treasurer, made a tiny baby step yesterday, saying that one particular class of government employee will get a 2-year wage freeze. In NDP land, that is shocking restraint. Of course, 100,000 jobs lost in the private sector, wages are down, unemployment is way up. But a baby step for the government, am I right?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a step in the right direction, a baby step in the right direction, as you say, but it is just a drop in the bucket. I mean, this is more so a symbolic gesture than it is a meaningful spending cut, and unfortunately, the economic realities that we're facing in Alberta right now call for meaningful spending cuts, not just these sort of symbolic gestures. So more show than substance, I would say.
You're right, and I mean, a freeze of any sort in NDP land is, you know, that's almost like kryptonite to them. But here's what I want to point out, is that this wage freeze is not for all government workers. It's only for, get this, non-unionized government workers. The NDP in Alberta is still protecting their union base. I mean, could they be more clear, Paige, that they are really a government by the unions, for the unions, of the unions? I mean, the Premier's own husband, Lou Arab, works for CUPE, the Canadian Union of Public Employees. Most of the MLAs or cabinet ministers came from a labor union background. Their agriculture minister, O'Neill Carlier, union background. Environment minister, Shannon Phillips, Alberta Federation of Labor. So basically, it would be shocking if they didn't protect their union friends. They're basically union bosses who've taken over the legislature.
Well, regardless of their views on that or their backgrounds that have to do with unions, the reality is what the reality is. And so what Alberta really needs right now is more than just this sort of showy kind of baby steps. So what we're seeing now, you know, as we just saw on the screen, 0.1% savings in what we're going to spend as taxpayers on government employee compensation for this year. I mean, that's basically nothing.
Hey, let's put those stats back up on the screen.
And, you know, we're dealing with 3.5% of all of the government employees in the province. It's just not a big chunk because most of them are unionized, and maybe that's going to be tough for an NDP government. That might be the case, but these tough choices need to be made. We need to address unionized employees, not just the non-unionized, you know, management role sort of easy targets, because it just doesn't make enough of a difference. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and the fact that they are explicitly exempting their union comrades shows that what their real ambitions are. Now, I saw, I don't have the website handy at my fingertips, but I saw it this morning. Statistics Canada looked at Alberta over the last 12 months, and there have been tremendous job losses in oil and gas, in construction, in basically every sector. Housing is down, car sales are down, everything, except the government sector. In the past 12 months, Paige, according to Statistics Canada, and I should do a little show about this, the number of government workers in Alberta in this annus horribilis, this terrible year, 2015, is up more than 40,000. Now, they're not all provincial employees, they're municipal employees, they're federal employees, but as the province gets poorer and worse off, the government sector is actually getting fatter by more than 40,000 jobs. How could that even be sustainable?
Yeah, it's as if government is shielded by this golden bubble, right? And we're all expected to pay for it, but they seem to be exempt from the economic realities that the rest of the province is facing. And it's not just the private sector. I mean, yes, look at the oil and gas sector. They're not, doing a little wage freeze for 3.5% of their employees. What they're doing is, slashing jobs, slashing salaries. That's the unfortunate economic reality of the province right now. But even if you look at the public sector, Alberta is actually out of touch in terms of how we compensate our government sector employees. On average, the average government employee in Alberta makes about $7,500 more than the national average government sector employee in the rest of the country. So we actually they're out of touch, these salaries and compensation as a whole. We're talking pensions as well, all of the nice perks that you get when you work in that government sector. It's out of touch with the private sector, and it's out of touch with the rest of the government employee sector across the country. So no, they can't continue to grow. They can't continue to say that they're making spending cuts when they're only cutting $28.5 million and they're facing an $8.9 billion deficit this year when you include infrastructure spending. You're right, it is absolutely unsustainable.
That's just incredible. I think that 2015 was a disaster for Alberta, and I'm going to say it was half caused by world oil prices. I think 2016 is going to make 2015 look like a walk in the park, and it will be all caused by government policy. Just last week, we saw a private investment fund pour $142 million into oil and gas in Saskatchewan, just across the border. They got the same pipeline problems, they got the same low oil price problems, and yet $142 million new dollars went into oil and gas there. It is fleeing Alberta. That is not some external global force. That is Rachel Notley and her crew of destroyers. Paige, you are one of a tiny handful of people fighting back. Last word to you.
Yeah, well, I would agree with you. I mean, the shirking of responsibility is a big problem. Our credit was downgraded. The reasons for which were, of course, oil prices, but also the size of our debt, the lack of a credible fiscal plan to pay it down. The government, first of all, needs to own up and take responsibility because, of course, we all know that admitting you have a problem is the first step in recovery. So I agree that's a big priority in 2016.
Paige McPherson, you're one of the best. We're really counting on you and the Taxpayers Federation. You're one of the few NGOs, non-governmental organizations on the right side of the spectrum. Although, frankly, listen, if you're a left-winger, you want your taxpayers' dollars to be respected too. So I think even left-wingers should support the Canadian Taxpayers Federation and your work in particular. Thanks, Paige. We'll see you again soon, I hope. Folks, stick around. After the break, Milo Yiannopoulos is back. We're teaming up with him for free speech. I'll give you more details after these quick words.
Looking for the perfect gift? Did you know the Rebel.media has a store? Make a statement with a t-shirt. Have your morning coffee in a Fearless Travel coffee mug. There's even an Ezra Levant bobblehead. It's a one-stop shop for the perfect gift. And don't forget to pick up something for yourself. Go to therebel.media/store to find out more.
Welcome back to the show. Well, we launched VerifyMilo.com. It's a new website. Who's Milo? Well, you remember him. We had a great interview with him on Monday. Milo Yiannopoulos is a controversial and fabulous conservative columnist. He is the senior editor of Breitbart News, and he joins us now via Skype from UK. Hey, great to see you again, Milo.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me and for everything you've been doing.
Oh, come on. You're overdoing it, but I love it. Just a quick recap for folks who missed our longer interview. On Monday. I think that you and Ann Coulter are similar. You're really smart, you're funny, you combine those two things with a lot of research and humor, and it makes heads explode on the left because they're not used to dealing with charming, funny, devilishly controversial people on the right, other than to silence you, right?
Exactly, and to have somebody sort of charming and irascible, and I'll stop flattering myself, it messes with them, but it particularly messes with them because they're not used to this sort of the identity politics thing blowing up in their face. With Coulter, you've got a woman who's saying actually you're wrong, although she doesn't actually talk about women's issues to her credit because she couldn't. It'd be very easy. And you've got a gay guy like me who doesn't follow the consensus either. I try not to talk about gay issues either. I talk a lot about gender politics and a lot about Black Lives Matter and modern feminism because I don't want to just play the gay card, but they can't cope with the fact that this man and this woman just don't fit the mold. Both, sort of charming and witty blonde superstars. They took this verification badge away as a sort of slap on the wrist, but things have been going very, very bad for Twitter since. Thanks in part to my fans and in part thanks to what you've been doing, having me on the show and this amazing website for which I'm so grateful. I'm not going to claim that we are totally responsible for Twitter's stock price tanking down another 5% yesterday, all-time low closes day after day after day. Twitter stock is going through the floor. What I will say is that the themes that this story touches upon are exactly the things that investors care about. They care about transparency of enforcement of the rules and the product. They care about the behavior and engagement of power users, and they care about user growth. What has Twitter done with me? It's taken a power user, stripped him of his status, making me much less likely to go there, and making me much less likely to bring new users to the platform too. And it's also been completely untransparent about the process. All three of these things are exactly why people are selling Twitter stock right now.
It's a very thoughtful analysis. I mean, Twitter was, in its early days, it was about freedom. It was about freedom of speech for those who had things to say, but it was also for freedom of the users to say, I am going to select or curate, to use a word, who I listen to, and I'm not going to let any interlocutor get between us. If I want to hear someone on the far right or the far left or a comedian or I can be my own content selector. So you've lost these two things. You've got a loss of freedom of speech for the communicators like you, and you've got a loss of freedom of choice for the sort of passive people who want to hear the news. I'm both. I tweet a lot and I listen a lot.
I'm the same.
And here's the thing: when we set up verifymilo.com, it's our attempt to appeal to Twitter's better angels. Twitter knows everything you're saying is true. The people who founded Twitter, the ideas were about freedom. I think what you have here is a secondary sort of parasitical organism that has riveted itself to the side of Twitter, the social justice warrior. I do not believe that the engineers and computer programmers and the visionaries who created Twitter, however many years ago, were the same political or economic culture as these social justice warrior whiners and censors. And we've got to get Twitter to come back to what made it great in the first place, right?
Well, that's the only way that it's going to save itself, because it's certainly the only way it's going to arrest the decline in its value. But here's something, you're even more right than you realize. I don't know how much you know about this, but Twitter actively filters the responses that you see on its site. You won't even get to see all the responses from your tweets. And it has a thing called a quality filter where you can turn that on and you can turn that off. And if you turn it on, it's going to attempt to show you just sort of what Twitter thinks are better quality responses, which means like nice spelling and punctuation and grammar and progressive. No swear words and no real language. But even if you have it turned off, Twitter still filters tweets more, as well. You don't get to see everything people are saying directly to you on Twitter. And there's no way to turn that off. You can't control it. It's really amazing. I have this all the time, like as a public figure with a lot of fans who are young and who like cracking edgy jokes and things like that. I will go to their profile and I will see tweets that they have sent me that never show up in my mentions column. This is Twitter just arbitrarily deciding what I can and can't see from my fans. It's unacceptable. And it's one of the reasons that people are losing trust.
Yeah, and if you wanted that, you could go to any other newspaper's website and get their filtered stuff. In Canada, so many of the large newspapers are shutting down the comments sections for the same reasons you describe. Oh, it's about quality. No, it's not. It's about the political quality of the comments. And what's the point of a Twitter that is curated, censored, or filtered by someone else? That's not a Twitter anymore. I'll go and find some new thing. Last word to you, Milo. I say a word to that. I'd have to check the stats we've had. We're aiming for 100,000 people to sign up. You've got more than 140,000 followers. We've got followers. I want to have a big number that I show Twitter, that I deliver the petition in a week with a huge number and say, look at what you're doing. Give us a final encouraging word for people to go to verifymilo.com.
Well, if you want to go to verifymilo.com and sign it, I'll be grateful. I'm grateful to Ezra for setting it up. And I'll tell you why it's important. You might not like me, you might not like my jokes, you might not even like my politics. Even viewers of this show might think I go too far. But here's the key thing. It starts with me and it ends with you. This is why we defend not just speech, but offensive free speech. We defend speech, that does upset people precisely because it's those people who are the canaries in the coal mine. In this case, you have a fabulous canary in the coal mine who is, being punished by Twitter for jokes and having criticism and ridicule mischaracterized as abuse and harassment. And it happened to me last week, and it's going to happen to you next. And now is the time to draw a line in the sand and find out where Twitter really stands on this issue. If Twitter wants to double down and say, you know what, we're a progressive website, and if you're a conservative, sooner or later you're going to get banned, you're going to get suspended, this isn't the site for you, fine, but let's hear it from them. Yeah. And if they really truly believe in free speech, if they believe, as Jack Dorsey said in October, that this is a platform for free expression, if they believe, as Jack Dorsey told New York Times writer Nick Bilton for the book Hatching Twitter, that Twitter should be like a utility, like the water company. If they really believe those things, let them show us now.
Outstanding. Milo Yiannopoulos, there's the man himself. Go to verifymilo.com. Great to talk to you, my friend. We'll keep in touch in this battle. I think we can win this one, by the way. I want to be an optimist here. All right, stay with us after these words. Your viewer mail. Don't go away.
Ontario residents are being hosed on electricity prices. The latest Auditor General's report says we've been overcharged by $37 billion over the last several years. That works out to nearly $2,800 for every man, woman, and child. Why? Mismanagement and bad policy choices from the Ontario Liberals. It's going to cost us billions more in coming years. Energy Minister Bob Chiarelli won't take responsibility. He's lashing out. It's time for Bob to go. If you agree, go to firebob.ca. That's firebob.ca and make your voice heard.
Welcome back. My favorite part of the show, your viewer feedback. Cecile Choplin writes in and says, thanks for everything you do, Ezra. I'm a former green leftist from Europe who had a serious change of heart, partly due to your show. Laugh out loud. The only thing I disagree with you on is hunting and vegetarianism. However, that is it. Hi, Cecile. Thanks for your friendly note. A lot of people make the journey in life from left to right. Life experience has a way of doing that. There's a saying, a conservative is a liberal who's been mugged. And Europe is getting mugged big time these days. I like to joke about vegetarianism. It's actually not that big a deal for me. I use it humorously as a surrogate to talk about radical environmentalists. I note that we're getting more and more viewers from Europe as that continent is set on fire by millions of Muslim migrants, overwhelmingly young men. What I'm learning is that the news media in Europe there is actually even worse, more biased, less diverse than our own Canadian media party, which I thought was awful. So I appreciate hearing from you. The next letter is from TGIF Yukon, who writes, I really appreciate your media presence in these liberal times we're presently experiencing. Great website, but your website needs to install a print button so we can properly print your articles to give to friends, relatives, etc. The pages in their present format look very unprofessional when printed. This print problem inherently hinders your distribution numbers and marketplace penetration. All right, fair enough. Now we're going to refresh our website next month. That will be our third major version of the website since we launched last year. I'll pass your suggestion on to our IT boss to see if we can do it. I know we do have some other sharing functions on the site like Twitter and Facebook. We should probably strengthen those too, but thanks for the tip. Lauren writes about my RCMP exclusive about the new hijab. And he writes, it appears that you are trying to play on the fact most people probably don't know the difference between a hijab and a niqab. A hijab is not a face covering. The hair is covered, not the face. Women in Saudi Arabia are typically wearing burqas, not hijabs, as are many women in Iran. If the RCMP survived the Sikh turban, I don't see the hijab as a problem. A woman in a niqab usually has her entire body covered in a shapeless robe, while most women in hijabs are either dressed in modest Western clothing or completely covered in skin-tight clothing. Neither is equivalent to a burqa or niqab. The issue is where the right to wear religious clothing impacts on someone else's freedom or safety. I would be more interested to know about the gunfight at the Calgary Club and whether it was gang or religious-based. If it was not religious-based, then your group should publicly note it. All right, A lot of points there. Lauren, first of all, I asked the RCMP for a photograph of their new hijab uniform, and they haven't given it to me yet. So what I did is I showed other hijabs from other police forces, like this one here. I very clearly showed what I was talking about. This is in Edmonton and Toronto they have these things. So I showed very clearly what I'm talking about. And I distinguished this from the full ninja style niqab. But I think you missed the point of my argument. A uniform is a uniform, one form, an image like a flag of our secular state. We don't have Christian police wearing big crosses. We don't have Hare Krishna police dressed in robes. We have a neutral secular image so people who deal with the police know that they're dealing with an agent of the state following the Queen's laws, not an agent of another ideology following Mohammed's laws. As to Sikh turbans, I explained the difference in great detail yesterday. Simply, Sikh turbans have been part of the military uniform of the British Empire for 200 years. They're not symbols of sexism against anyone, whereas the hijab is about the subordination of women and a judgment against women not wearing them. And last point, we did report on the show. We had a follow-up about the Somali shootings in Calgary, and we did note that the Calgary police, after a day of saying they were investigating whether it was terrorism, said it was not terrorism related. So we noted that on the show. You got to keep up, Lauren. Here's another letter. This is a tweet from Ishmael Darrow, who said, "Oh my God, Ezra Levant's latest website is verifymilo.com, a petition to get Milo Yiannopoulos verified by Twitter. Beyond sad." Look, it's tough to take any criticism seriously coming from Darrow, who is a typist at BuzzFeed. I mean, look at their website. They make Teen Beat magazine look like the Wall Street Journal. But other than the mere assertion that my Verify Milo website is sad, why? Where's the argument? Why is it sad to try and fight back against political censorship at Twitter? How is that sad? Isn't freedom of speech and tolerance for differing views the lifeblood of the internet? I mean, whether you're at the highbrow Times of London or the bottom of the barrel BuzzFeed.com, shouldn't we all support freedom of speech? Shouldn't we all be able to have our say on the internet? And if people don't want to listen to us, that's fine, but to ban people? I mean, I get it. If Twitter wants to become a liberal-only website, that's fine, but then say so guys like me can find another website to go to. I mean, isn't half the fun of Twitter that you get to choose who you listen to? You're not limited to what some anonymous bureaucrat censoring things says you can see and says you can't see. That's what this is about. If you want to learn more about what I'm talking about, go to verifymilo.com, see for yourself, and sign the petition. This is about free speech for everyone, even the bottom of the barrel BuzzFeeds of the world. Hey, that's our show for today. What do you think? What do you think about the rape slavery case out of Montreal? I can't believe it. It truly reminded me of Paul Bernardo and the way he lured girls in and psychologically abused them, and especially when he raped two girls together, one crying and holding the other's hands. That felt very Bernardo-ish in terms of its depravity. And it's a conviction, it's a sentence, 10 girls treated this way. And yet I looked at all the newspapers in the country today. I couldn't find anything other than that small story in the Montreal Gazette, 2 websites in Montreal, and a TVA clip. Seriously, nothing in the National, the Toronto Star, the CBC, the National Post, Maclean's. Where? Why? You and I know why. It's because he's a Muslim rapist against white girls, not a white rapist like Paul Bernardo. This is the media covering up the news you need to know. When it comes to controversial issues, whether it's global warming or terrorism or Muslim migrants, you just can't trust the mainstream media. I'm Ezra Levant signing off for today. You keep fighting for freedom. We'll see you tomorrow.